Poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of Tactical Tuesday. As always, this is your hosts of Tactical Tuesday, Coach Brad Wilson and John. John, how you doing, sir?
How's it going, Brad? Got a couple of your hands to look over today. I think, Brad, you played these on your poker coaching stream that you do every once in a while, pretty recently. So pretty excited to take a look at a couple high stakes NL hands.
Yeah, once a month I play some 510 NL on Poker Coaching Premium, and we do need to talk about these hands and get through them because I've got 2 episodes left of Squid Game, and you know, you and I have been talking about it for probably the last 30 or 45 minutes. I don't even know why I like it so much or it's so fascinating. It's a little bit I don't even know what the right word is. Disturbing. It's pretty disturbing, and yet I can't get enough.
Oh well. Hopefully I think they're renewing for another season. So after these 2 episodes, you'll have more to chew on.
Yeah, I gotta say though, I do love the set. Like if you go to chasingpokergreatness.com and like there's some of these like designs that look like MC Escher-esque, like the set of Squid Game, like the stairs that they walk up is just so fucking cool. Like I don't know how they got that done or what the budget was, but it's just really cool.
Yeah, and actually it does look a lot like the Chasing Poker Greatness icon design or like the city design in Chasing Poker Greatness. Oh, I didn't really think of that, but that's a good point.
I've thought a lot about the Chasing Poker Greatness website design, more than I would care to admit. But yeah, these 2 hands played on the Poker Coaching stream. We're going to break them down. That's the commonality between them. They're very different hands. So, John, do you want to start breaking down hand number 1?
Sure. So, hand number 1, playing 5-handed at 510 no limit. Brad is first to act in middle position. He opens ace queen offsuit to $25. There's a kind of short, or I guess like half stack fish in the cutoff who 3-bets to $60. Everybody else gets out of the way. This 3-bet is really, really small. It's coming from a player who I think we can safely assume is a fish, just given his stack and also his 3-bet sizing. I would be looking to peel mostly with ace queen offsuit, given this like really good price and the fact that it's a fish 3-betting versus a reg. I think ace queen offsuit would be just a slam dunk 4-bet bluff candidate. But versus fish, who probably are not 3-betting the bluff portion of their range properly, and also given the fact that we're getting such a good price, I would just go ahead and flat this and try to flop a good hand.
Yeah, so I guess this is the first portion of the hand where I do go ahead and 4-bet. So I 4-bet to 170, and I can't remember exactly what I was thinking, but it's possible that I had some sort of HUD stat that this fish was more on the volatile side and 3-betting a ton, or maybe they had a betting pattern where like they're 3-betting very often small or something like that. But I have to imagine that like reopening the action here with ace queen, this is just for pure value. Like I had to have a good idea that I'm just, most likely dominating or pushing equity against this player profile, and I don't think they're ever folding to this 4-bet, like ever. So yeah, I did go ahead and 4-bet to be for the podcast listener. To the villain in this hand started with about 64 big blinds, so $640. So I'm 4-betting to 170, and they do go ahead and call. And what kind of flop we got here? There's 355 in the pot. The flop is queen of clubs, 10 of clubs, 6 of spades. We have ace queen. The villain has, the SPR's like 1.3-ish. The fish has $452. We have top pair, top kicker. And now I guess I'll ask your thoughts here for this first decision point on the flop.
Wait, sorry. Before we get to the flop, so just to clarify something, pre-flop, you said like this is like ace queen. The 4-bet with ace queen offsuit is for pure value. You think you're pushing equity versus this fish's 3-betting range. Would you be calling off versus a jam?
No earthly idea, but I mean, if I look at the pot size and the stack they got left, it seems like once I 4-bet to 170, I'm probably not folding to, their jam for like 640 or whatever.
Yeah, it'd be pretty tough to fold for the remainder of his stack. But again, like I'm sure, I wouldn't be super super excited about calling it off with ace queen. I was just curious if you were more excited about calling off versus this fish than I would be. But sounds like you're not. You're
I'm getting like close. Yeah, I'm getting close to 2-1. So I can't really fold ace queen getting 2-1.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, I think you can go. I think you can go a lot of different ways on this flop. I think starting with a small bet is probably the most standard thing to do. Starting with like, I don't know, close, probably around the quarter pot is usually what I default to in 4-bet pots. I think given that this particular fish is pretty short and has like just over 1-to-1 stack to pot ratio, I think checking the flop is totally reasonable as well, and trying to induce a bluff or induce value bets from worse hands. Even if it gets checked through on the flop, it's not really a disaster. You're still going to have a really easy time getting stacks in versus a hand that's going to call off, and maybe a hand stacks off maybe the fish stacks off slightly lighter once the flop checks through. So I think the only option that I really don't like on the swap is a big bet or a jam or something of that nature. So checking or small betting, I think would be my 2 preferred options.
Yeah, I think I prefer checking the most with this SPR. Like you said, we have no trouble getting the money in whenever we want to get it in. And like really thinking about this spot, I mean, I guess the first question is like, are we giving equity to any portion of villain's range by checking? If it checks through, that is really bad for us. And I think that like if villain has a gut shot, like ace jack, I don't think it matters. Like I think they're just getting the money in most likely on the flop. Like if we check, they're going to bet. And if we bet small, they're probably going to jam. If they have a flush draw, there's nothing like the money's going in. If they have king jack or jack 9 or 8-9, I think the money's just going in. So I think that like all the hands, and if they have a pair, jack 10, king 10, ace 10, I don't think they're ever folding a pair once they flop a pair with this stack to pot ratio. Mm-hmm. So I think that like any hand that we're really quote unquote, afraid of giving equity to, I just think that those hands are all never folding no matter what we do, and they're just always going broke. And so like basically what I don't want to do is bet and allow a hand that has like 0 equity that just is never continuing to just easily fold. I think like sunk cost fallacy is kind of in play here as well, where villain has 452 and they're a weak player and there's 355 in the stack in the pot. So like this is a pot that I feel like they're probably gonna battle for if I just give them an opportunity. So in this exact spot, I would be checking range, like I would be checking everything. And if I have a hand like, ace king, then I'm probably just ripping.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I was trying to think of like hands that I would want to just rip myself. I think ace king is maybe like the only one that I can think of really quickly off the top of my head. I think like another consideration when it comes to checking is that you might be able to win the cutoff stack in that way when like a bet like would basically create a situation where you never win their stack. I think checking here after 4-betting, one thing that I wouldn't be shocked to see is that the cutoff just like turns a hand into a bluff that they would never call or like never bluff in a more normal situation, but they sort of see your 4-bet check on this board as like ace king and just ace king only, and so like I'm gonna go out of my way to get them to fold ace king and just turn like 4 or 5, just like jam 4 or 5 of hearts, or like jack 8 or something like that maybe they just fold versus any other type of action, and they're they just get really excited about trying to get you to fold ace king. Or maybe even like something like turning pocket fives into like just like a protection jam and saying like, oh, okay, like this hand needs some protection. It's ahead of ace king, which I think is what the four better has once they four bet and check. So I'm just gonna rip in that hand. Whereas like it's probably gonna be tough to stack pocket fives in any other way, unless they're putting the money in themselves. So yeah, I think a lot of good things can come from you checking, and like you said, you're not giving up that much against hands that have equity versus ace queen.
Yeah, and this hand just came to mind that I also played this one on Poker Coaching stream too. I had an ace 7 of hearts, and villain opened 20. From the cutoff, I 3-bet the button to 60, and the big blind called, and the flop was like Jack 7, and the cutoff folded. Jack 7, I had ace 7 of hearts. Villain checked. I bet like a third, and villain check raised like 4x. And I called. The turn was like the 8 of hearts. It went check, and then the rest just check down, and villain had pocket sixes. And villain was a fish, and that's sort of the same line of thinking there. It's like, oh, they bet really small. They have ace king. I've got a pair, so I need to like protect my pair. So I'm just going to raise and put some money in. Right. In this case, they would just be like jamming their pocket fives or jamming their like 6-7 suited, or, just some sort of hand like that. Right. And that's like totally expected. It is not surprising, not shocking. It's the expectation that in a spot like this, when you check with 1 bet left, that a weak player is just going to put the money in with a pair because they think you just have ace king.
Yeah, I agree. I think that happens with a really high frequency in these spots.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it wouldn't, right? Like you would think that like we're playing 5, 10, and L online, that like these things just don't happen, but it's like kind of kindergarten class sometimes. It's like they just do, Yeah. So we check, and villain does go ahead and oblige by putting in. It looks like a little hefty bet.
Like a 2/3 ish.
Yeah, 2/3 ish size bet. They bet 215 and 355. They leave themselves with 237 back. I mean, at this point, like, I think we just have to jam, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess jamming certainly is the most standard play. I feel like I'm a little bit biased because I know what the cutoff has. In this situation.
You are totally biased.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm jamming. I don't know why I'm even thinking about finding a flat in the situation and trying to like. I mean, the reason for flatting would be like, okay, like I don't want them to fold like a total airball hand that maybe they jam themselves on the turn if I check, on the turn. Here, for example, like they're not going to call with like 4 or 5 of hearts if we jam here, but they might jam the turn with 4 or 5 of hearts themselves if we call this bet and then check the turn. But yeah, I think. I don't know, like now that we say that out loud, it's like what, like really, like are we just getting jams from like all the hands that are gonna call this check jam on the flop anyways, like on the turn? Like aren't his flush draws and jack nines and king jacks and like 8-9s, aren't they all just gonna jam the turn for the?
I don't know. Once they bet 215, like I think like it's possible that like a hand like king jack or ace jack or 8-9 or a flush draw can check behind once we call the bet on the flop and just try to realize equity. Like the pot's going to be like 800 and they've got 237 left. Like right. I think that you just have to protect against villain over realizing. If I were in position, then I would just call because then just give them a chance to put the money in. But I don't want to like just give them a chance to over realize on the turn.
Gotcha. Yeah. And like, I mean, over realizing is one thing. The other thing is like, maybe if you jam here, ace jack just, shrug, calls it off. But then if ace jack, if you call here and ace jack doesn't improve on the turn and turn goes check, and they don't improve on the river and you jam the river and they just never, they don't call because they haven't improved. Whereas like in this spot, maybe ace jack just calls it off 100% of the time.
Yeah. Or king jack or jack 9 as well.
Right.
Or 8-9. All those straight draws, I think, are just going to be happy to try to make something.
Right. So jamming here in an effort to like stack those hands, even if like even unimproved is a big benefit to jamming here.
Sure. Villain does fold because, like you said, you know the result and you know what they have. I mean, if I know what they have, then this spot gets a lot easier, right? They had the ace of clubs, 9 of spades, which I guess my in-game read of 4-betting the ace queen was pretty spot on, given that they had the ace 9 off. So yeah, I mean, obviously, knowing what we know now, check calling is better because they're like basically drawing dead. But yeah, I do think that this gives more merit, for the podcast listener and for the YouTube watcher, like checking in these spots to trap this one bet is a big deal. It's like an extra 21 big blinds from a hand that had no intention of putting any more big blinds in the pot had you gone ahead and bet. So there's like a lot of value here and just giving Villain the opportunity to put this bet in.
Yeah. I think this is like that's like for sure like the crux of this hand is exactly what you said. It's like getting money from a range or a hand that we can never expect to call a bet ourselves. This is like a spot that I think occurred a handful of times in our coaching sessions kind of earlier on, where like I would just bet this. I would like quarter pot the flop with ace queen versus a fish that has like an SPR 1, and you sort of just be like, what are you doing? Like, just check. And like, you can always put this money in like on later streets with an SPR 1 or like just over 1. You don't have to worry about putting money in on the flop right now. And like, in fact, like all you're doing is denying these sorts of situations where ace 9 offsuit is going to put in 21 big blinds or whatever. Yeah, 21 big blinds inappropriately, and we're saving themselves from making that mistake. So yeah, this was something that definitely came up in our coaching sessions pretty frequently.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes up for lots of people where they just get in this mode of like, I just bet quarter pot, and then they just bet quarter pot, and it's like, no, let's think about this. Like, let's actually invest thought into this instead of like just trying to go with some like pre-vanilla plan against a player profile that we can take actions like this, and they're extremely, extremely profitable.
Yeah. It's also just super excited or super easy to get like really excited when you flop top pair, top kicker in a 4-bet pot and just be like, oh, okay, I want to put money in. I want to, I want to make sure this guy gets all in, when you don't really need to be super concerned about that when the SPR is so low.
And also like when you have a really good hand and there's like close to 1 bet left, I mean, a lot of times it's more valuable just letting your opponent put the last bet in, because if you have a really good hand, like you need them to have a hand too to put the money in, and like that's kind of hard, right? It's not often that both of us flop very well that we just both want to put the money in. All right, so the next hand after the break is it's a doozy, and we broke it down in Poker Power Hour, and now we're going to talk about it here, and I have a lot of thoughts, but it's certainly one of the stranger hands that I've played over this past year. And so stick around after the break. We'll break it down.
In a world where a fish donk bets the flop, and you don't know what to do, one man,
Coach Brad Wilson,
has a surefire plan to neutralize flop leads and rip that dunk to shreds. Nuffle. Available now. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com/Nuffle. Rated R.
All right. Welcome back from the break. Be sure to check out Neutralize Flop Leads. It's a good course. Lots of people have said so, including John. Right, John?
It is confirmed a good course. It is a little bit of an understatement. It's I think everyone should get it. I said this actually in the YouTube, like when we were watching the premiere. It's really short. It's like a super short and sweet course. It's 1 page of info that will like print you tons of money, and it doesn't cost a lot because the course is relatively short compared to the other super meaty courses. But I think it's like the best mass data analysis entry course for anybody, where it'll take you like 5 minutes to learn it, and then once you learn it, I assume your initial inclination will just be to buy every other course because of how good the strategy is. So yeah, I think it's a great just gateway course for anyone who's looking to experiment with MDA.
For somebody that doesn't know what poker is, it just sounds like you were just selling some kind of drug, I think.
Yeah, MDA,
gateway course, MDA. Yeah, I mean, basically, if you play any live poker, the WSOP is going on right now, like 2-5, no limit. I mean, you open to like $30 and somebody calls and they donk $30 into you. Like, it doesn't take very long for $199 course to pay for itself, and you never have to worry about, getting donked into again by a fish. You just have a plan, you know what to do.
Yeah.
So this hand, I do not have an MDA course for this hand, and I do not know exactly what to do, as we're about to see. So this hand starts out, I have 100 big blinds. I'm on the button with a king and a jack, king of clubs, jack of spades. I don't think the suits matter. Start out by opening to a quarter on the button. We're playing four-handed, and the big blind calls. I don't think there's really much to talk about here.
Do you have like any impression of the big blind before this hand, like reg, weak reg-ish?
I can't remember. I think they're reggish. I think they're reggish is from what I remember. But also, for those people in the audience, and for you too, I don't know that you've ever streamed poker before, but like whenever you're streaming poker, like it's quite a cognitive load. Talking about everything that's going on, like explaining your thought process, trying to take all the data points in, trying to prioritize them and just see everything. I feel like whenever I play on a live stream, like you just miss things because you're investing so much energy trying to like verbalize the thoughts that just go on in your head in a way that like makes sense. You're answering questions from the audience. So I think that this player was a reg, but I'm not entirely sure.
Okay. All right. Well, he doesn't suck, or he's not like a total fish, I guess. So that's a data point.
Yeah, that's the data point. They're not a total fish. Yeah. So we have the king jack, and the flop is jack of hearts, 8 of clubs, 6 of hearts. Villain checks to us. There's 55 in the pot, and this is decision point number 1.
I'm definitely c-betting. I think there are a couple options you could go when you're c-betting. I think c-betting small with range, just in general, button versus big blind, is going to work out fine. I think on this flop, personally, I would c-bet a larger size and play some checkbacks. So I would probably c-bet 2/3 pot in this situation if I had king jack.
Yeah, I know. Big better check strategy. This is classic John in the year of our Lord 2021, the month of September. We'll talk in December and see if you've moved on from big better check strategy. By the way, I'm noticing right now, and I don't know what's going to happen, but if you're watching this on YouTube and you see that like the screen is going red, I don't know if anything's changing for you, John. My nighttime filter's on. We're recording this at like 9 p.m. and my whole screen is going red. Don't know if that translates into OBS, but don't worry, you're not going crazy. It's just bedtime for me. But with that said, the flop's jack 8-6, 2 hearts. I felt like villain has lots of natural check raises, queen 10, 9 10, 7 9, just queen 9, something like that. I just felt like they have a lot of hands that are naturally going to check raise, and so I have top pair and felt like going small would be my best path here because I want to get check raised a lot when I have top pair second kicker on a board like this. So my strategy differs from yours in that I will change it based on kind of what I want to happen versus the specific profile that I'm playing against.
And you think that like all those hands are way more likely to check raise versus a small size than they are versus a large size, right? That's sort of what your strategy hinges on.
Are you more likely to check raise 9-10 off facing a small and facing a large?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, yeah, I guess that's correct. That like versus a small size, I'd probably start throwing more hands into my check raise range. But I think like the supernatural like check raises, I would just check raise regardless.
7-5. Queen 9,
yeah,
Queen
like
10.
hearts, yeah, like I think just a lot of those like really natural ones, like 9-10 definitely, 7-5, 7-9. I'd be really tempted to like, I don't know, 4-5
That's a
of
lot of
clubs
check
type hands.
raising.
Yeah,
That's a lot of check raising versus a big bet.
yeah. I mean, I'm also gonna just have. I mean, I'm gonna have like all the 2-pair combos on the swap and I don't know, at least bottom and middle set too. So I don't know. Have a lot of value that I'm probably gonna.
I do
wanna check
have a
raise too.
data point. I do have something about this player that I just now remembered as soon as you said you have bottom and middle set. They were 3-betting something like 25%. They had earlier, they opened, I believe it was like under the gun with like Jack 10 off, and they were 3-betting a lot. And I do know that when I bet this flop, I remember thinking like they don't have 8s. I know they 3-bet 8s pre-flop, most likely pure, and they probably 3-bet 6s like half the time as well. Like I remember specifically thinking that before I bet here, because when the inevitable happens and I do get check raised, I just remember being like happy as a kid in a candy store, like, ooh, like this is just, I mean, if they have Jack 8 or 6-8 or Jack 6, then so be it. But like they don't have middle set, and that feels pretty good.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So I guess we'll move on from the flop conversation. I mean, I'm not doing anything other than pure continuing versus this check raise with a Jack.
There's nothing
strong of hand. Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing to do. We just call and see what happens on the turn.
Yep.
And what happens on the turn is a king of spades. So we turn top 2 pair. And there's 189 in the pot. We have 900 left. And now I'm, again, thinking really good thoughts. Like, if villain doesn't have 8s and probably only has like half the combos of 6s, then this turn card is like pretty much gin for me, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like if we didn't have the best hand on the flop versus a lot of the hands that were beating us on the flop, like all the 2-pair combos, given that he doesn't have 8s, there's going to be like way more 2-pair combos than sets now. We've just now turned the best hand quite frequently.
Yeah. And now that I'm thinking about this hand, like I think that villain, we mentioned before we started breaking the hand down whether villain was a reg or a fish, and I think villain is like just like a volatile fish. Like I think they're just raising and playing too many hands too aggressively. Like that's the profile that like I would say they are. Okay. They decide to check the king, which to be quite frank, I think is somewhat expected. Like I think this is a turn card that like is kind of difficult for them to continue barreling on. They're just repping too thin of a value range, and they've got way too many natural check raises on the flop to be able to just, kind of go nuts, I think.
I mean, I would expect most players, and especially the aggro volatile fish, to just continue barreling their bluff check raises on the flop, their draws, just keep going ham with them. I mean, like Queen 10 is one, like a very obvious one that's like now improved to an open ender. I don't know, like maybe they perceive the king as being a little bit of a scare card for you. Like if you have like 10s or 9s or some weak Jack X, like the king doesn't look great from your perspective. When I see like check raise check in the spot, like my initial reaction is that like the big part of the range is now just going to be like Jack 10, Jack 9, Queen Jack hands, that top pair hands that felt comfortable check raising your small bet on the flop, but now sort of just are just want to get to showdown a little bit now that you've called their check raise. Like I feel like that's like a very natural portion of the range to check raise the flop and then check the turn.
Or just pure give ups, like just ace deuce of clubs, or I mean just like pure random check raises and then just giving up.
Yeah. Ace 7 of clubs or something like that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that's what I would think like most of the range would be. I would just expect like a volatile fish to not know that like, oh, I'm barreling too much if I check raise all of my natural bluffs and barrel them all in turn. I would expect them to just inappropriately continue barreling the turn, even on a king.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like, it's kind of funny looking back on it now that, like, with the label of volatile fish, it changes how we perceive the strategy to be. I think that in game, my thought was just like they're probably range checking. I think given the benefit of hindsight and knowing that they're kind of a volatile fish, or having it like confirmed after thinking about it for a few days, I think you're right. But I did think they were just going to be checking most of range here on this turn. Like, that was sort of my inclination. And so I just decided to size up on the turn. I thought I have like, I thought the perception would be I've got natural bluffs. This turnover card is going to be bluffed. And also I did think they had like queen 10, 9, 10, 7, 5, those type of hands that I could just get value from, and wanted to kind of go polar.
Yeah, I think that like if your in-game read was that, you know, they're gonna be checking closer range on the flop, and if that's the case, they're certainly gonna have lots of you know, worse
just
hands
on
than
the
ours.
yeah, just on this overcard king,
yeah.
I thought.
Right. Then I think sizing up makes sense, because there's just gonna be so many hands that can call like a larger bet, and like if you're, you know, if the alternative is betting like a third pot, stabbing like a third pot on the turn, then you're just giving such a good price to you know, just
everything.
Yeah, just a wide array of hands that are now getting like clearly the right price to call. You know, just their open enders and their flush draws and combo draws and stuff like that. So yeah, I think if that was your read in game, then sizing up on the turn makes sense. But I do think your turn sizing, like stab sizing, is kind of worthy of discussion in this spot, because I remember when I first looked at this hand that I was surprised that you sized up so big.
Yeah, I mean, this is just 70%. Just the 7 on my keyboard. Like you said, I think 30 seems way too small, and 50 seemed too small, and so I just decided to go 70. I thought maybe 90 seems too big, so that's how we land on 70, right? I think that's like just the thought process that I had, that 90 is probably too big for the 7-5 type hand. 70 seems like a good place. I mean, the other alternative, I guess, is 50%. Like, is that in play here, do you think?
Yeah, I think like if you ask me, like, you know, if 33% would be like my standard default size, and if you ask me like, okay, you have to size up because of, you know, these reasons, like how big would you size up to? I think like, I don't think I'd go up to 70. I think between 50 and 2/3 would be my size up size in this situation, because I think like a hand like 7-5 is going to see 70% and kind of just know to fold. It's just, you know, other than like check raising again, like check calling with a hand like 7-5 just seems way too loose. So, you know, if you really want to put those weaker draws in a bind, I think sizing down to 50 makes a lot of sense too. But I mean, there again, like we said, like there are just so many strong draws that are not going to have a problem calling the 70%. Like a flush draw is just not, you know, is going to be like so happy to call 50, and this size is going to be the size that sort of puts them in a little bit of a tougher spot. So I like this size. I think
7-5 is really the only hand that, like, 50 looks better. Like, I think 9-10, I don't think they're folding like 9-10 to 70% on the turn, even though they probably should. I just think 9-10 looks much better than 7-5.
Right. Yeah. Maybe 9-7 then is like the the cutoff end.
Yeah, 9-7 maybe. Anyway, we're splitting hairs here too, because we're like in between like 50% and 2/3.
Yeah.
70. So anyway, by the way, for the podcast listener who forgot what the board is at this point, we've got top two pair. The board is King, Jack, 8, 6. We're not even into the interesting part of this hand yet, which happens right here. And so we bet 130 into 190, and the villain gives us the old double-fisted check raise. Check raise on the flop, check raise on the turn. They check raise at 355. Tell me what you're thinking here, John.
I mean, like double check raise is just, it's such a rare line that I don't have like a go-to plan or like a I don't really have a plan for like how to combat these or how to think about these double check raises since I face them so infrequently. My initial just guess on double check raises is that they're going to be under bluffed. I think it's just much easier to do this with a hand that it's very clear that going double check raising is fine, like a value hand, and it's like I said on the turn, like it's just really tempting to just continue barreling your draws and your bluffs from the flop, especially on kind of a scary-ish overcard turn. So I would guess that this double check raise is going to be skewed towards value, but we're getting like such an insane price. We're getting 3-1, and he could conceivably be value owning himself with a worse hand than ours. Like if he ever does the double check raise with a hand like Jack 8 or Jack 6 or 8-6,
or even King 8 or King 6 if they did something weird on the flop.
Yeah, like a hand like King 8 of hearts could maybe find this double check raise. We're just, it's scary to face this, but we're getting too good of a price, and we could still be dominating their value range. So those two things together are just, I'm just calling this 355 check raise on the turn.
Yeah, it's funny you use the word scary. I mean, what's the worst that happens? He stacks us. I've been stacked 100,000 times in my life, I remember saying on stream that I didn't think this was a flush draw. Like that was the thing that like I felt really in the moment that villain didn't have a flush draw. I thought what was more likely would be a hand like ace 10, some kind of gut shot. I just didn't think villain would want to reopen the action here with a flush draw on the turn.
Right.
So
because it sucks to get jammed on when you check raise a flush draw. And, okay.
It's really not good. Check raising with a flush draw, getting jammed on, and then being forced to like fold your equity. So like I thought it was like something like that. I mean, and then also I think I did mention like sixes makes a lot of sense too. Like sixes make sense. I think some straight draws make sense, and then maybe some like random 2-pair hand that's just taking a very funky line. Yeah. But I wasn't ultra concerned about flush draws on the turn, to be honest. And I mean, like I said, I wasn't scared either. I'm ready to go broke. If I have top 2-pair and villain has bottom set, then this RIP stack. So yeah, I call the turn, which leaves me with 547 left in my stack. There's 900 in the middle, and the river is the deuce of hearts. And so the final board is King Jack 8 6 deuce with the flush completing river. So the front door flush completes on the river with the deuce of hearts, and villain checks. So this is I was actually like, if villain jams, I'm snap calling. Like I'm not folding. I didn't think villain had a flush draw on the turn. I still thought that I would beat a lot of like busted straight draws or some just random hands that they have. Facing the check, though, I was a little frozen on whether or not to value jam the river.
Yeah, I remember when you shared this hand that I was like shocked that villain checked a heart river. I thought like, yep, like all their, this is like the perfect card to bluff with all their bluffs that are the straight draws that bricked, and like if they do have a flush draw, obviously they got there. And then I just thought like the better kind of made hands on the turn would also just be jamming for a little bit over half pot on the river as well. So I don't know. I mean, like obviously I'm not unhappy that they checked on the heart turn. Like I feel better about my hand. I guess better about my hand now than if they had jammed.
Well, yeah. We really lose to sixes. That's the only hand we lose. And I think sixes is like, do I think villain should check sixes on the river? Hell no. Like if you're watching this on YouTube right now and you have a set and the flush completes on the river, you have to jam, especially if your plan is to call all in, because if you check and villain like checks back aces or like ace king or king jack, then that's really, really, really bad for you, because you get no value when you have villain coolered, and you lose when villain does river a flush. So like you should be jamming here with, your sets. With that said, what I find interesting about this hand, and we've talked about this before, it was like a hand that Jason Kuhn played in a high stakes tournament where he had an ace queen with the ace of diamonds, and he checked
jam on the turn.
Yeah, he faced a jam on the turn. I think he bet the turn, and villain jammed, and then he's like, King of Diamonds, like King of Diamonds 10, like he called out villain's exact hand and said something along the lines of like, I know you didn't know what to do on the turn. And like, I remember watching that back, and he actually ended up folding the turn, despite calling out villain's exact hand. And I remember talking to you about that and saying like, that was like Jason Kuhn's ability as a poker player. Like he knew there was like one combo of hands or two combos of hands that basically passed all the tests through all the data points, right? Like only two hands made sense, and he recognized that very quickly. And despite that, he ended up folding because I think like, you know, the theory got in the way of like, well, you know, I've eliminated villain's hands down to two, but like, do I really trust this like soul read type of situation? And I think here I mentioned on the stream that villain's value hand was sixes. And I remember thinking like, I remember hesitating before I jammed and thinking like, man, like sixes makes a lot of sense. And so I preface all this by saying that, yes, I do jam because I can't sleep with myself if I check back and villain shows like Jack 8 or King 8 or something. I just like, I can't like live with myself as a human knowing that there's only like three combos of hands, and not only just three combos of hands, but also like three combos of hands that are like chopped up in multiple different ways, because villain took this very exotic line of like check raising flop and then check raising the turn too, where like sometimes they're going to check raise the flop and bet the turn with a set of sixes. So like there's some like removal there.
Sometimes you're just going to jam the set of sixes on the river.
Yeah, sometimes they're going to jam the set of sixes on the river instead of checking. So like basically I was just like, you know, I know sixes makes a lot of sense, but like I don't think they have a flush, and so I'm just going to jam. And villain just like pretty much snapped it and showed a set of sixes. And yeah, I was thinking about in preparation for breaking this hand down on Tactical Tuesday and thinking to myself, like, you know, I kind of soul read the situation of like, yeah, villain has sixes. Like that's the hand that I'm like positive. I'm sure villain has sixes in their range. And I still jammed anyway, just because I couldn't trust that like they didn't have a hand like King 8 or, you know, 6-8 or Jack 8 or King 6 or something like that.
Yeah, something like overrides your logic or your and like Jason Kuhn's intuition in those situations where you're like, you narrow them down to one hand and then something takes over and you're like, surely this human being has more than one hand, like gets to the situation with more than one or two hands, right? Like they must, you know.
They must.
These two, yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, it's like you just don't trust that like internal instinct that's telling you, like your intuition that's like so honed and refined that's like letting you know. But I mean, I did hesitate and think about jamming the river before I jammed. But ultimately, yeah, I think that the times that I'm playing the best, the times that like I'm in the zone and in flow, is exactly when I just trust myself. Like I just trust that little voice. I trust my intuition. I trust my instinct, and I just check back because like I'm just, yeah, I have a lot of self-trust. And here, you know, whatever. I think I can't even really say that like it's a mistake. All I could say is that like I feel like I played, you know, not to my ability here. Like I left some on the table, but whatever, you know, I think, I don't know. I jammed top two pair for value, like whatever.
No. Yeah. It's so hard to like know whether like you're playing, you know, whether what you said is true and you left some on the table, or if it's like, it's just so hard not to be results oriented in this situation, because when they show up with sixes, that's how you feel. But if you check back and they showed up with Jack 8, then you'd be like, well, I left something on the table. Like,
yeah.
You know.
And I honestly, I feel like it's easier to live with myself doing like the obvious thing than it is doing the non-obvious thing.
Right,
you know,
right.
like it's like, well, I'm protected because like pretty much anybody would jam top 2 pair here. So like I can just do that and I'm okay.
Yeah.
And if I check back, then I'm like, that has the potential to go like way wrong if they do show some sort of 2 pair.
Yeah. Getting punished doing the obvious thing is significantly less psychologically painful than getting punished trying to do the weird thing and being like, oh my God, why did I try to do the weird thing? Like,
exactly. Like, why did I do this weird thing? Okay. Yeah, this is it's an interesting hand, and yeah, I think that's going to do it for this week's episode of Tactical Tuesday. My screen is red. Your background looks like it's doing something. Yeah, it's going. Your background is just going insane. The Matrix is falling apart. Everybody's going to see the facade. That is our camera setup here.
Got to shut down this episode before this video falls apart.
Yeah, the Matrix. Sorry, guys. Yeah, we got to go. Talk to you all next week. Is that what you say? Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter. Join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter @CPG Podcast.